Hello, everyone. Good evening and good morning to all of you joining us from across the world. Thank you for joining us on the busiest day of the year for the community. Today is Rare Disease Day. It's an annual observance for those of you who are joining us for the first time. It's held on the rarest day of the year to honor and stand with and raise awareness for over 400 million patients who suffer from rare diseases. Today, we are excited for a wonderful lineup of events. Please move to the next slide. Thank you. We will begin with an opening address by our host, Dr. Harsha Rajasimha, founder and executive chair of IndoUSrare. Our main event is the Fireside Chat with a legend, Dr. Abbey Meyers, founder and past president of NOD. This would be followed by the highly anticipated Art for Rare 2023 award ceremony, which would be hosted by the directors of Orphan Drug Act and event organizers, Mr. Srinivas and Ms. Rekha. We'd end with vote of thanks by our board director and treasurer, Mr. Nara Govindarajan. Next slide, please. As I said, this is our main event, and this is what most of us are here for. We start with the Fireside Chat, and then next slide, we move to the Art for Rare, which would be hosted by Srinivas and Rekha. Please stay on for the awards, which would be announced, and you would also get a glimpse of all the amazing art which was contributed by participants from across the world, across age groups, on the subject, all things rare. Next slide, please. As we move into our main event for today, I'd like to call upon our host for the opening address, Dr. Harsha Rajasimha, a brief glimpse into Dr. Harsha Rajasimha's journey. Next slide, please. Dr. Rajasimha is a trained genomic scientist. His life-changing event with the birth of a child with a congenital genetic disorder in 2012 changed the trajectory of his career, and he is now a social entrepreneur working to accelerate diagnostics and life-saving treatments for rare diseases and neglected diseases across the world. Dr. Harsha would be taking over from now and taking the program forward. Thank you, Dr. Harsha. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Nisha. Welcome, a warm welcome to everyone joining us from all over the world today. A very happy Rare Disease Day. Today, we are here to honor the sufferings and the struggles that families with rare disease go through. About 350 million people worldwide. And no better way to do that than to welcome and honor Dr. Abbey S. Meyers, the person who sparked the fire for the rare revolution 40 years ago with the Orphan Drug Act of US FDA in 1983. Next slide, please. Let me quickly share the vision and mission of Indo-US Organization for Rare Diseases. We are a 501c3 nonprofit based here in Virginia, focused on accelerating diagnostics and treatment options for patients affected by rare diseases globally, mainly through cross-border collaborations between multiple stakeholders that are critical to work along with patients being the center of this revolution of rare disease drug development. Next slide, please. The key problem here I want to highlight is the clinical trials for all diseases have predominantly focused on the United States and European Union, where more than 80% of clinical trials are executed historically, resulting in a severe lack of global diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. Patients in the rest of the world have very limited access. And while even within the US and Europe, patients living far away from academic medical centers in hot pockets like Boston and Bay Area and Chicago don't have the same access. And that's a significant problem that the whole community recognizes and is working together. And at IndoUSrare, we are looking to fill this gap. Next slide, please. With our key programs focused around the patient in terms of education, awareness, outreach, and research collaborations on both US side as well as Indian subcontinent and increasingly global, as well as advocating on the rare disease legislative advocates this week, as it is RDLA, as well as the industry stakeholders through our corporate alliance program and the Patient Foundation Alliance. The frequently asked question is, We have a lot of large population in India and potentially a large patient pool affected by individual rare diseases in India. How do we engage, identify, and collaborate with these patients with global patient registries and clinical trials? And that comes around with the patient concierge, which is a gateway for patients to request assistance from our organization. Next slide, please. So if you are a patient joining us today from anywhere in the world, you can contact us through our website. There is a tech-enabled patient concierge service, which is free of charge to patients. You can submit that form, and our expert staff can provide guidance and connections to key resources anywhere in the world for your particular rare disease and situation. If you are a nonprofit patient advocacy organization, we invite you to join our Patient Foundation Alliance. We are modeled to provide cross connections between groups in United States with those in India and vice versa, not just with each other, but also with industry partners and government policymakers, as well as other resources that can help you. And if you are joining us from industry background, we invite you to join us and collaborate with the Corporate Alliance Program, as well as donations and grants programs, as well as sponsored research that could help assist with executing our programs. Next slide, please. We have a strong leadership team on our board, advisory board, and management team set up to execute the vision, and we encourage you to reach out to any of our team members. Next slide, please. We measure our impact through the number of lives we reach, individual patients, organizations, and countries covered through our programs, as it's all a digital world and it's all a global community of rare diseases these days. And we are very fortunate to be collaborating with all the rare disease groups doing phenomenal work in the US and globally. Next slide, please. And today we are here to commemorate the 40th anniversary of Orphan Drug Act on this momentous occasion of Rare Disease Day 2023. Next slide, please. To recount on the success of the Orphan Drug Act of 1983 that was first started in the United States, and how that has impacted over the last 40 years on a global scale. As you can see on the screen, starting with US, Japan, Canada, Australia, and Europe, we have now come all the way in 2021 with a national policy for rare disease in India. And a lot of work still remains to be done, as having a policy is just the beginning of a lot of innovations to come in helping patients with rare disease, as 93% of rare diseases still remain without a approved treatment. Next slide. And to do that today, no better way to honor and celebrate the successes of the Orphan Drug Act over the 40 years than with the person who started it all and sparked the fire 40 years ago, Dr. Abbey S. Meyers. Next slide, please. So today we are here to honor Dr. Abbey Meyers and engage her and hear from her story and experience of the origins of the Orphan Drug Act of 1983 and the journey since that followed after that. Dr. Meyers is the founder and past president of the National Organization for Rare Disorders, a coalition of national voluntary health agencies and a clearinghouse for information about little-known illnesses. Abbey currently holds the honorary title of President Emeritus of NORD, and in the past, she has also served as honorary president of the European Organization for Rare Disorders, before she retired from her busy life as a leader in the rare disease community in 2009. During her professional career in the US, Dr. Meyers served as a consumer representative on the National Commission on Orphan Diseases from 86 to 89. and the Human Gene Therapy Subcommittee, the NIH Recombinant DNA Advisory Committee, FDA Biological Response Modifiers Committee, and the HHS National Human Research Protections Advisory Committee. Mrs. Meyers is the recipient of the FDA Commissioner's Special Citation for exceptional dedication and achievements on behalf of all people afflicted with rare diseases in 1988, and the Department of Health and Human Services Public Health Service Award for exceptional achievements in orphan drug development in 1985. Mrs. Meyers holds an honorary doctorate from Alfred University in New York. So it's my utmost honor, pleasure, and delight to welcome Dr. Abbey S. Meyers. Welcome, Abbey.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here.
Next slide, please. So, Abbey, you authored this book, Orphan Drugs, A Global Crusade, in 2016. And this book has been widely acknowledged and read and followed as a Bible for orphan drug development, and the extraordinary scientific and industrial progress that ensued, including the development of orphan drug legislation in other industrialized countries around the world. So could you share the story of how it all culminated in the early days in the 1980s and what led to the enactment of ODA?
Yes, well, I think that in general, the people in the field knew that there was this problem with trying to get manufacturers interested in developing drugs for a disease that was rare enough to for them to assume that they would not be able to earn a profit from the drug. In other words, they based their drug development decisions on how big the market would be. And with rare diseases, they just felt there wouldn't be enough to make enough profit. And so it became very personal for me. I didn't know about this. I was just an ordinary person. I have 3 children. And my oldest son had very bizarre symptoms as a child, and nobody knew what was wrong with him. They kept saying it must be psychological because he can't sit still. He jumps around. One part of him is always moving, no matter where he is. You know, his arms, his legs, and he would make noises. Any kind of noises. Didn't matter if he was just clearing his throat, but he would do it repeatedly. And all of these things were very disturbing because in school he would do very poorly because he couldn't sit still, and teachers felt you had to sit still in school. And one Sunday, I just happened to sit down and read the Sunday newspaper, and there was a magazine in the Sunday newspaper called the Parade magazine, and there was an article in it about a young man who had a disease called Tourette syndrome. And as I read the article, I realized this is the disease that my son has. And I called the pediatrician on the Monday morning, and I said, I just read an article about the disease that my son has, and I needed to get in to see the pediatrician. And he said, give me the article. And he just read the first few paragraphs, and he realized that I was right. And he said, this is really bizarre, diagnosing a child based on a newspaper article, but that's really what happened.
Right.
And so they tried some medicines on him to try to get him to sit still, to reduce the symptoms and so forth. And the drugs didn't work, or if they did work, they put him to sleep. So the teachers would be angry that he fell asleep in the classroom. They were upset always with him. And so the doctor that we went to handle Tourette syndrome was the guru of Tourette syndrome. His name was Arthur Shapiro of Mount Sinai School of Medicine in Manhattan. And he said, okay, none of these drugs have worked. And he said, I'm doing a small clinical trial on a drug that I'm getting from Europe, but I'm very happy to try this on him if you're willing to put your son into a clinical trial. And that's where I learned about clinical trials. And I felt that his safety was being adequately considered, and put him in. And this drug worked like magic. He wasn't tired, he wasn't falling asleep, and it reduced his symptoms substantially.
Incredible.
And then one day, every 3 months we would go back, and every 3 months the doctor would give me another supply for 3 more months. We went back, and the doctor said, okay, here's your 3 more months, but this is the last refill that I could give you.
Right.
Because the company decided not to develop this drug for Tourette syndrome. They were developing it for a common disease, and the drug didn't work on the common disease. But they didn't care that it worked on Tourette syndrome. There weren't enough people with Tourette syndrome in the United States.
Right.
And so I was just devastated. And at the time I was working at the Tourette Syndrome Association. And I phoned the people from other rare disease organizations. I called somebody from the Huntington Disease Foundation. I called somebody from the Epilepsy Foundation. Even though epilepsy affects 4 million people in the United States, it's a lot of little diseases. There are many small populations of different types of epilepsy.
Right.
And so I called somebody from one of the skin disease organizations and bone diseases, Paget's disease. And I said, look, we have this problem with Tourette syndrome. We can't get a drug manufactured, no company will sponsor a drug for Tourette syndrome because there aren't enough people with Tourette syndrome. Are you having this orphan drug problem? And they said yes. They couldn't get any manufacturers interested. Here they were raising money for research on their disease. And if an academic scientist came up with a treatment, they couldn't get it manufactured. No company would go near it.
Right.
And so we realized we had to work together to get something done to solve this problem. Sometime later, this is all, months later, a young man in California who was taking the same drug that my son was taking, because he had Tourette syndrome.
Yeah.
And he asked somebody who was going to Canada to get a supply of the drug and bring it back for him. Well, as this person was coming through the customs area in San Francisco, the customs department confiscated the drug and said, you can't bring this drug in. It's not an approved drug. So it's what approved meant approved by the FDA, and it was not approved by the FDA. It wasn't approved by the FDA because no company would bring the drug to the FDA to approve it.
Yeah.
And so I asked this young man's mother.
Yeah.
She said, what should I do now? And I said, well, this is a federal government problem, so call your congressman. And who is your congressman? I said. And she said, Henry Waxman.
Right.
Well, Henry Waxman was the most powerful member of Congress for all health issues. He was chairman of a committee, and if anything was going to come through Congress that had to do with health, it needed Henry Waxman's support. And so we got Henry Waxman and his staff familiar with this orphan drug problem.
Right.
And he said, I'm going to hold a hearing. Well, he held the hearing and he invited the pharmaceutical companies to come and testify also, and they refused. And they said, there is no problem, and these people are making it up. There is no orphan drug problem.
Right.
So it was just 4 people who went to testify. It was me and a doctor and Adam Seligman from California and a doctor for him. And it was just the 4 of us. And you spoke from the heart, and we told Henry Waxman what was happening.
Yeah.
And that went down in the congressional record. Well, he made it clear also that he invited the pharmaceutical industry to come and testify, and they refused. And he felt that they should be ashamed of themselves. Well, there was only one person in this big audience. There was no people sitting in that audience, except for this one man all the way in the back.
Yeah.
And it turned out that he was a reporter for the Los Angeles Times, because Henry Waxman was from Los Angeles, and this young man who testified was from Los Angeles. So the LA Times showed up.
Yeah.
And they wrote an article that they printed in the LA Times. Youth urges lawmakers to back orphan drugs. I think that was the title of it. And Jack Klugman's brother read the article.
Right.
And that was the springboard. Excuse me, good. What did you say?
Yeah, so Abby, what's so striking about this entire story is that what led to the Orphan Drug Act was not the lack of availability of an orphan drug for Tourette syndrome. The drug was indeed already available. It was just not being made available to patients who would benefit from the drug just because it was rare. And that, I think, is extremely noteworthy. And you have beautifully outlined it in your book as well on the circumstances that led all the way up until the Orphan Drug Act enactment, and your early family situation with your husband being the veteran and in the army, in the defense, traveling to Vietnam and all that. And so you went through a lot of personal family hardships during that time, while also working on advocating for what transpired to be Orphan Drug Act. So kudos to you, and thank you for doing what you did. How do you feel today, Abby, given all the progress 40 years down the road? How do you feel about the Orphan Drug Act? Did you expect any of this to occur? What would you go back and change if you could?
We knew that it was going to be a success, but we thought it was just going to be a handful of drugs. And today we have over 1,100 orphan drugs on the market in the United States.
That's right.
I don't know how many are in Europe, but they've got a wonderful orphan drug law in Europe.
Right. That's right.
And many other individual countries have their own laws based on what their needs were. And I never thought that it would be as successful as it's been. And a lot of that has been that this network of support groups that are all over the world, and they raise money for research. And when a scientist really discovers something important, it's spread throughout the world. And so people, advocates, are working to get the companies interested in the drugs, and they are. A lot of these new pharmaceutical companies are biotechnology companies, and they're very interested in getting drugs that have a known market.
Absolutely.
And even though it's not a big market, it's a known market, and they know where to to direct those types of
Right.
drugs.
The other thing that's very striking about the story, Abby, is that you took it to the Congress and met with Henry Waxman. You took the lead in approaching the government and making sure your story and pain was made known to people who can actually make a difference on the policy side and legislation side. It's that's an exemplary story that inspires all the patient advocates, not just in the United States now, but also in every country, that if you have a circumstance that does not is not met completely by the healthcare system, you got to really step up, be a warrior and advocate, go and talk to the elected representatives. They have staff members and themselves very eager and open, and they are public servants. And so we need to really approach and make sure our stories are heard. And I think that was a other striking aspect of what sparked this. And
but we are a democracy, and so this is possible. There are many other government types around
Right.
the world
Right.
where it's not possible, where really the government doesn't care what the people think. And
Right.
but in the United States, these people have to be elected and reelected.
Yes.
And if they want to be elected, they have to listen to the people who live in the district where they are and will vote for them or vote against them. And
Yeah.
so it was very easy to say we kept all of the people who wrote to us about a rare disease, we kept their names and their addresses on index cards because there weren't any computers at the time.
Right.
And so if we needed to get to a congressman from Idaho or Minnesota, we would look up what their zip code was. We knew what district they lived in that state and who their congressman was. And we could contact them and say, contact your congressman
Yeah.
about this or that issue. And their congressman would automatically vote for whatever we needed because they
Right.
knew somebody in their district. Their vote relied on how their congressman behaved.
Yeah. So we derive a lot of inspiration from that aspect. And, as over the last few years, we have been active advocates. This week is Rare Disease Legislative Advocates Week on the Capitol Hill, and more than 800 patient advocates from all over the United States are going to converge here in Washington, D.C., where I am located in that area personally. And myself and some of my colleagues at IndoUSrare will be advocating with our own congressmen and senators in that region in terms of how India can be a key ally to rare disease patients and this revolution in accelerating diagnostics and treatments, especially gene therapy and biotechnology. There is a lot of science, but also a large patient population, which has remained disengaged or unengaged or even not identified in the last several years. So that's something we not only do here in the US, but also India, which is also a democracy. We encourage our brothers and sisters in India to follow the similar example and go and share their stories with their elected representatives in their regions. So thank you for sharing that, Abby.
Let me just point out one of the problems, though, and that is which applies to India as it does many other countries. The gene therapy is a wonderful new technology. As you know, I spent 10 years on a government committee looking at all gene therapy experiments. And what we're finding now is some of the gene therapies are getting through the system and getting through clinical trials, and I think there's 3 of them on the market now in the United States. But the problem is that they're charging so much money for those that there are many countries that say, no, we will not pay for it. Don't bring it into our country.
Yeah.
And so the industry has to come to the realizations that they cannot charge these prices that they're imagining. They have to charge affordable prices, because many countries which have national health insurance, they're not going to pay for it because the government is the one who pays for these drugs.
Absolutely.
And I don't know how to solve that problem.
Yeah, I think the way we are looking at it is the volume of patients can be significant when we go global and not be more focused on individual countries. And so the progress so far has been significantly nationalistic in nature, where we have had significant progress in US, and then Europe about 9 years later got their Orphan Drug Act with the EMA, and then Japan and a few other countries. But it's largely still been country-specific regulations. While we have global guidelines like Belmont Report and Helsinki Declaration, what do you think about having more global collaborations and bringing multiple countries together in having common guidelines and standards?
I don't know. I would have to look at that more clearly, but the problem is what's not tolerable is to say, okay, you rich countries can have these new cures,
right,
but the poor countries can't. It's just not acceptable.
Yes.
Not acceptable at all.
Absolutely. And so there I think this affordable innovation, as with most innovations, the first computer was a pretty big device, occupying an entire building and costing a few $1 million. And today it's a few $100s, and on every desktop even in low and middle income countries, everybody has some sort of a device or access, or most of the people do. And so was internet and most other innovations, and so I'm hopeful that, and I'm sure the entire rare disease community, that these life-saving cures or treatments like gene therapies can become more affordable, not just here in the US, but also in all countries, and everyone can have access to it, not only after they are actually approved, but even during the discovery and development process, during clinical trials.
Clinical trials, yes. Yeah, I have to leave this problem in your hands, because our experience is once a drug gets on the market, the price never goes down. It always goes up. It goes up every 6 months or so.
Right.
And the only thing that helps that, and this applies a lot to India, is when the generic drug becomes available and then the price plunges. India makes most generic drugs.
Right.
When we get generic drugs here in the United States, most of them originate in India. So India has the technology to be able to do generic drugs, and eventually some of these gene therapies will be generic, but it's going to be more than 20 years before that happens.
Yeah, that's a great point, Abby. India is considered the pharmacy of the world, manufacturing large volumes of drugs, but the small volume aspect of rare disease and orphan drug development poses a challenge. But nonetheless, I think with creative mechanisms, methods, and collaborations between US-based biopharmaceutical companies and the Indian generic drug manufacturers, I think there has to be a way to streamline this process, or deliberately, rather than letting it play out very slowly on its own. So I think that's an area where our corporate alliance is looking to bring together both the innovative new treatment developers from the US and Europe, together with their counterparts in India, to see how we can accelerate that translation and accessibility issue. So in terms of the lessons learned from your experience, Abby, what would you advise a newly diagnosed family with a rare disease, or a newly formed nonprofit patient foundation advocating for a given rare disease or a small group of rare diseases? What would be your advice?
Well, first I have to say, never give up on getting a proper diagnosis, because that's the biggest hurdle. And we find that it still takes 7 or more years to get a proper diagnosis. People with rare diseases, you go to your ordinary doctor, and the ordinary doctor has never seen anything rare. He's still going for the common things, the sore throats, the flu, whatever. And so you have to get to the right expert to get the diagnosis, and that's very difficult. As a rule, it's best to find an academic research facility, a hospital that trains doctors, and that's probably the best place to go, because the doctors that are in the departments like neurology or dermatology or whatever, they're used to seeing the rarer forms of diseases, the diseases that are not diagnosable in the ordinary medical population. So that's as a rule. That doesn't mean that it happens all the time, but it's probably the best advice. And then support groups. It's absolutely essential, if there is no support group for your disease, somebody has got to develop them. It's a concept called self-help. It means you find peers who are going through the same life experience, and you try to get support from them because they know what you're going through. And that's what you find in a disease support group. It isn't that you want to go back and tell everybody what kind of disease you have. It's that you need the support from other people, other families who have the same disease, because the mutual support that you get is so important. Nobody else knows what you're going through. And so that kind of a thing, once you get the self-support that you need,
Right.
Go out and raise money for research, because research is the only answer for all of the diseases.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you so much, Abby. So one question is there anything that you would go back and change about the Orphan Drug Act if you had a magic wand that you could use?
Well, the original Orphan Drug Act needed changes. So a few years later, we did change it. And the original law said it only applied to unpatentable drugs.
Right.
And we soon found out that a lot of these drugs were patentable, but the patent didn't protect them enough. So the 6 months exclusive marketing rights meant no other company could come in and sell the same drug or a similar drug for that disease. And so it was very important to change that right away and allow unpatentable drugs to qualify for orphan drug designation. And there were a few other things that needed to be changed, but we changed them within 2 or 3 years. After that, there have been some changes, some of which are good, but some of which are not good. And I worry that I've seen manufacturers who have gone down to lobby to make a change in the Orphan Drug Act that would benefit their drug and not benefit the whole issue. And I really get upset. I get angry when I see this happen with companies trying to tickle, just make a change here, make a change there, all
Right.
to benefit their drug. And I think people need to back off and not change the Orphan Drug Act, because you risk making the law less effective than it is now. It is at its maximum efficiency right now.
Right.
Do not make changes that are not truly beneficial to everybody, not one manufacturer and not one drug.
Thank you, Abby, for that. Absolutely. I think Orphan Drug Act has been and should continue to be for the benefit of patients and nothing else. And, the whole biopharma industry is largely, you know, consensus around patient centricity, and they should stick to that. And we need to work together collaboratively to see how we can help patients by engaging the industry in that vein, not just here in the US, but on a global scale. I think this globalization, especially with decentralization technologies, is enabling opportunity than ever before, especially after the pandemic, during which most of the patient engagement had to be through telemedicine and remote patient monitoring and engagement technologies, which now offers decentralized clinical trials and remote access to regions of the world which were less engaged, even within the US, in Midwest and certain mountainous and rural areas where patients have not had access before, now have the opportunity to access the world's leading experts in rare diseases through telemedicine calls on technology platforms. I think that's offering huge hope for the rare disease community.
That is absolutely, that's been one of the blessings that have come out of the
Right.
COVID epidemic is telemedicine, really. It's wonderful for people who live in very rural areas to be able to just call somebody and a doctor and talk to them over the telephone with video. It's fantastic. And I hope those types of improvements stay. Because it'll especially help rare diseases where you've got to get to an expert and the expert is half the country away, not just down the block.
Right. So there is a question about autoimmune diseases from the audience, from an anonymous attendee suffering from repeated IgA vasculitis that gets triggered every time he or she has an upper tract respiratory infection. It's a very specific question, and almost always the HSP gets misdiagnosed. So the question is, do you have any advice or strategies on how to manage autoimmune conditions properly?
Oh, I wish I did. I mean, I'm thinking of my arthritis, talking about an autoimmune disease. It's very painful and there's no treatment. And I asked the rheumatologist, how come you have all these treatments for rheumatoid arthritis, but nothing for osteoarthritis?
Right.
And they had no answer really. That they just knew that they were, nobody's working on the regular arthritis. For some reason, they all focused on rheumatoid arthritis.
Right.
But, the autoimmune diseases, you have no idea how many hundreds of autoimmune diseases there are. And, there aren't that many researchers in the world who could handle all of it. It's just.
Absolutely. A question from a volunteer from NORD, Abby, asking, as a Rare Action Network ambassador, she wants you to reflect on how Orphan Drug Act led to the forming of NORD as an organization.
Say that again?
Could you reflect on how ODA led to the formation of NORD as an organization?
Okay. As I said before, when I found out about orphan drugs, I talked to other support groups and I realized I can't go and fight this problem for my son. Nobody cares about my son. But if I get these other support groups who are all representing rare diseases, get them all together, then we have a significant legislative voice. We could get things done in Washington simply because there's so many of us. And so that's why we put all of these groups together. And we said, when the law was passed, we said we can't take this coalition and just throw it away, because we don't know if the government or if the industry are going to follow what the law says. And if we want to keep pressure on them, we need the pressure to come from this coalition of support groups, because we represent millions of people if we do that. And that's why we put NOR together. We just put, within 6 months, we got the nonprofit status and the corporate papers, and we were able to go into business.
Right. So one question is around the impact of Orphan Drug Act. We know there were probably about 3 or so orphan drugs approved in 1983. And today, like you pointed out, over 1,100 orphan drugs approved. And so how do we measure the impact of this in terms of number of patients, or do you have a ballpark on how else you measure the impact?
In 1983, we knew about more than 3 orphan drugs. We knew about 12, 15, maybe less than 20 orphan drugs. These were academic scientists who had developed something in their laboratory, but couldn't get it manufactured. In one case, the recovered patients had to go into the laboratory to put the powder, which the doctor had put together, powder, and put it into capsules by hand. So the recovered patients were putting it into capsules so that the doctor could give it to the patients. It was extraordinary. So I think that the number of orphan drugs have surprised us, because we didn't expect the industry to look at the orphan drug law and say, this is an incentive. We need to develop a drug that fits in under this law. And we never expected that to happen, because we thought they were still developing drugs based on the size of the population. And they wanted to develop drugs for big populations.
Yeah.
Blood pressure drugs, I mean, if you look at the market for blood pressure drugs, it's well over 100 of them, different orphan drugs, different blood pressure drugs, because there's millions of people who have hypertension. And we just never imagined that people would look at the orphan drug law and say, let's develop something on purpose. And especially the big multinational companies, we never expected it to happen.
Right. So initial years, Abby, took several years before we could get a drug through the regulatory process, getting from when a drug was discovered or a treatment was discovered in the laboratory to when it was actually approved by the FDA or regulators. Today, how do you feel about where we are today? Has it gotten better? We know about 1/3 of orphan drugs approved by FDA tend to be orphan drugs or precision medicines. And enough one-type clinical trials are being permitted by FDA on a case-by-case basis. Antisense oligonucleotides and mRNA-based treatments. So it's looking extremely hopeful and positive for the rare disease community today than ever before. What's your crystal ball prediction for what's to come in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think we're going to have many technological breakthroughs in the next 10 years. One, of course, the gene therapy. I think there'll be breakthroughs. When I look at the gene therapies that are coming through now, they all seem to be using the same vector, the AAV vector. And we all know that we need other types of vectors. And I think that'll be the major technological thing. But we'll also see advancements in other diseases that lead the way to. Everybody thought, especially in support groups and they thought that if they put their money into finding the gene for their disease, that all their problems would be over. If they find the gene, they'll find the answer.
Yeah.
Well, in many, many diseases, they found the gene and they have not found a therapy.
Right.
One of these was Marjorie Guthrie, who was the wife of Woody Guthrie, and who was a very famous folk singer, American folk singer, and he was very, very famous. He died of Huntington's disease, and so she started a Huntington's disease support group.
Right.
And she poured the money into the genetic studies. And they finally found, from the time they said, we know where the gene is, on which chromosome, et cetera, but they couldn't find it. And it was because it was on the very tip of the gene. And it took them 10 years from the time they found the position of where that gene was until they found the gene itself. It was 10 years. And then everybody expected for sure it's going to be a gene that makes a certain chemical in the body and that will be able to put into a drug and the disease will be cured. Now it's 20 years later and they still haven't found a treatment for Huntington's.
Yeah, right. So that's
finding the gene is not always the answer. It's a good stop on the roadmap to the cure, but it doesn't mean you're going to get it tomorrow when you wake up.
Absolutely. I think there is a lot of scientific advances, information and literature that needs to accumulate, but also what the patients and families are saying about that rare disease. Often patients are the experts in that particular rare disease who are living the life. And so a combination of these two types of data points coming together from both the scientific literature and the patient registries and natural history studies is the hallmark of advancing drug development for orphan drugs and rare diseases.
That's an important point because the patient registry is something the support group could do.
Yes.
They get the names and addresses of patients, get all of the commitments to the secrecy of that information so that the patient's name won't be up in lights on Broadway, you know.
Right.
And then and keep that information so that it can be like patient history. I mean, the main thing that we've found in a lot of these diseases that weren't studied was what is the normal history of the disease in these patients? What happens first? What happens second? If the patients are going to die, about what age are they going to be? How many people in their family are ordinarily affected by this? You know, who can keep the patient history? It's got to be the support group.
Absolutely. And
they're
then
the ones who know how these
right.
how this disease normally goes. And without that, you can't develop a treatment. Because if you could say these patients die by the age of 3, and you can give them a drug that's going to keep them alive after the age of 3, then that's efficacy, right? That the drug is effective.
Right.
But if you don't have that information, you can't do it.
Absolutely. And I think we have seen over and over again many success stories in rare disease. Many of these approved orphan drugs, the 1,100 approved orphan drugs, a majority of them or all of them probably had patient registries, natural history studies, backing up the data and providing the information and a baseline for these patients as to what was their disease progression before the treatment, investigational new medicine, versus how did that progression modify and become better or worse after the treatment was administered. I think that's a very important message that we try to raise awareness, particularly in outside of US, where awareness about patient registries is still lacking. And the focus is more on getting access to treatment when in the first place, there is no registry or natural history understanding of the disease. So thank you so much, Abby. There is a lot of questions trickling in, and we won't unfortunately have time to get to all of them. And can we get the screen up, please, Sadiq? Abbey has kindly offered to ship a number of books, copies to IndoUSrare on this occasion. This Orphan Drugs, a Global Crusade, which is a wonderful read. And if you start the first page, you can't stop until you're done. So it's a very, Abbey has probably answered many of the questions that the audience is asking already in this book. So I encourage all of you to contact our organization through our contact us page, and we will do our best to get as many copies of these books shipped to you. There is only going to be a limited number of copies, so hurry up. Thank you, Abbey, for kindly offering to ship a few copies of these books.
Remind people that they can also read it on the internet if they don't mind reading the electronic version. It's for free and it's on my website, which is
AbbeySMeyers.com.
Thank you. Bless you.
Yes. You are very easy to find online, Abbey. If
Okay.
you are not.
Good.
So absolutely, it's there's a free PDF electronic version on the website. So you can download it directly from there. But if you wish to get a copy of the book, you can write to us and we will get a few copies out. Next slide. Keep going. To the last topic. I think we covered a lot of these. Abbey was able to cover in her talk. Next slide. So any closing thoughts, Abbey, as we move on to the next part of the event? Wanted to get your final words of wisdom and hope for the rare disease community on this momentous occasion of the 40th anniversary of Orphan Drug Act. What would you like to share, your words of wisdom and advice?
Well, I think the role of the patient advocacy groups has to be the same as it's always been. I mean, you have to understand that alone, you have no political power, because you're just representing a few people. And the only way to get political influence is to join with other support groups and to, well, you don't have to really lobby. Sometimes it's just influencing health issues in Congress. But you need to do that because everybody has to stop thinking according to their own issues. For example, if you represent a pediatric disease, you don't say, I'm not going to lobby for that other issue because it only affects elderly people. What you want is the elderly people to influence your pediatric thing. So you have to join together. And the one thing you have together is rare. That your disease is rare. You don't represent millions of people. You only represent a number of people. It could be less than 200,000 or less than 500,000 or whatever number everybody agrees to. And you have to make sure that you don't think in the selfish ways that we're used to thinking. You have to think of all the people who are representing something rare, a disease that's rare.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for that advice. One final question, and that is, what's your advice on engaging young students, from high school, college days, as well as youngsters who are not necessarily affected by rare disease themselves? The rare disease community has largely been driven by patients and families. And there are many empathetic individuals who care about the cause, who care about the sufferings, even though they themselves or their families may not be affected. It seems like there is a bias towards getting more patients and families here. What's your advice on engaging young students and into this rare revolution? What role can they play and how should they get involved?
Absolutely, you should bring in the young people. First of all, they have so much energy. They can accomplish so much more than we old people. But what I've seen when I went to the Tourette Syndrome Association to get the mutual support from other parents, and I didn't really see anything that my children would be attracted to. But now I see the Tourette Association, for example, has created a whole separate group of young people. They've said, okay, you're not interested when you come to the general membership meetings of things that your parents are talking about, but why don't we have you, the teenagers, etc., the young people, you will meet in another room and you will talk about what you want to talk about.
Right.
So they really are catering to the younger people. I wish that was there when my children were young. I have 3 children and 2 of them have Tourette syndrome. So the disease is still very important to me, but they have really moved ahead by thinking in terms of satisfying the needs of different levels of people.
Yeah, great. Next slide, please. So go back one slide. So with this, I have to conclude this fireside chat with Dr. Abbey S. Meyers. And Abbey, what a wonderful, inspiring life you have led, and you have become an example for an inspiration for many of us. And we remember your contributions today and every day, and we honor you and your contributions to the Orphan Drug Act, but also the rare disease community over your entire very successful career, I would say, even though you did it out of your personal passion. So thank you again. We appreciate you making time and sharing your wisdom with all of us. This call has been recorded and will be made widely available on the YouTube channel of IndoUSrare, as well as other places. It's already live on Facebook right now. So on behalf of everyone at IndoUSrare, I once again thank you for joining and on this fireside chat today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I enjoyed it.
Great. So with that, we will move to the next section of this, on the final section of this event today. Bring up the slide, please, on the Art for Rare. So we had a contest, Art for Rare, over the last about 3 months now. And this has been organized by my dear friend, Srinivas, and his wife, Rekha, both residents of the Bay Area. And they have no personal connection to rare disease, but they deeply care about the cause and have been a big support right from very early days of my rare disease advocacy journey. And they have been supporting with multiple events. So this year, they have organized this, as well as in the last 2 years, the Art for Rare contest, with the theme being all things rare. And after 3 months of many submissions, today they'll be announcing the results of this contest. In my view, every contestant is a winner, but a few will be acknowledged and recognized today for their creativity and their contribution. So with that, I welcome Srinivas and Rekha to take it over from here. Welcome, Srinivas.
Hello, Harsha. Hello, Dr. Abbey. It is a very pleasure meeting you all, and I'm very excited to be here. And it was actually fantastic to listen to Dr. Abbey Meyers and all the journey what she has gone through so far. Very inspirational to hear about it. Okay, so Harsha, I can take it over from here on?
Yes, please take it over and with the Art for Rare proceedings.
Okay, Yeah, thank you. So I will share my screen. Please just give me a minute. I think host has disabled the sharing is what it says. Can I get help here? Technical help.
Yeah, you can try now.
Okay. Okay. So okay, I hope you can see my screen. Can someone confirm it?
Yeah, I gave you a thumbs up, Srini. Go ahead.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so yeah. Hello once again to everyone. As Harsha just introduced to this contest, so this is Art for Rare, and this has been actually been conducted by IndoUSrare for multiple years now, and so this was a 2023 edition, and the theme was about all things rare, such as like rare plants, animals, etc. So it could include abstract information as well. This was actually a multi art kind of thing. Basically, there is no restriction on the type of submission with respect to 3D or mural or anything like that. And this was actually a worldwide art contest. And our organization was successful in reaching out to many parts of the world as part of this raising awareness related to the rare diseases, especially among young children and young adults. So we received a total of 43 entries, and here's the breakdown. So, so we had our judge, Miss Prashanti Nekanti, so who happens to be an art director and a head teacher in Expression 8 Art, Fremont, California, USA. And she has an extensive background in the art field, over 25 plus years of experience. So she has worked both in the traditional art forms as well as in the digital art forms. And she has been honored and awarded for her artwork and contribution to nonprofits in various forums. So she was gracious enough to accept our invitation to judge our applicants. And so she provided her thoughts, and she was really impressed, and she conveyed well wishes to our IndoUSrare as well. And based on her judgment, like we actually have proceeded to announce the results here today. But before we go to the results, like we would like to thank all the participants to be part of this contest. And I hope this effort has raised the awareness and the main purpose what we have, not only for the participants and also for their friends, family, etc. So how did we judge? So the winners were judged based on the 3 factors. So one was presentation appearance, and second was subject and idea related to the theme which we have, and the placement in the composition of overall how look and feel. So all submissions were actually shared with the judges, excluding all the personal information. So pretty much we expect this whole process to be unbiased. Okay, under the age category of 5 and under, so we had received only 2 entries. So the Lighthouse from Arnav Kudatur and California Condor from Vismay Srinivas. Second prize goes to California Condor by Vismay Srinivas. California Condor happens to be one of the rarest birds in American land bird. So he picked this theme, and the winner is Arnakudathur. The lighthouse is a rare house structure, so the composition was impactful, and that's how it was picked. Congratulations, Arnav and Fishpine. Age category 6 to 8. So we had received like around 10 sub applications, and Golden Asteroid by Avinash Venkatesh, Albino Crocodile by Virinchi Garimella, Northern Lights, Dhriti Dhanodi, Great Horn Owl, Emmet Cordus, Fabled Beauty by Arna Bhatnagar, CYLD by Ashwat Muppala, Endangered and Rarest Butterfly Worldwide by Yukti Srinivas, Happy Side Rare by Maitri Karur, Pirate Treasure Chest by Pranav Wami, The Sad Cheetah by Miyesha Damodaran. We have a honorable mention, Northern Lights, Dhriti Dhanodi. Second prize goes to Happy Side Rare, Maitri Karur. We have a joint second prize for Yukti Srinivas, Endangered Rarest Butterfly Worldwide. And the winner is Sad Cheetah by Miyesha Damodaran. Congratulations to Miyesha, Yukti, and Maitri. Age category 9 to 12. Hydrophobic by Atharva Kudathur. Red Panda, Purvi Sakamuri. Rare Horseshoe Crab, Murphy 2. Pink Dolphin, Suhela. Wakita by Lavika Singh. Why do humans help other human rarely by Anya Jain. Ruby Meteor by Achyut Narayanan. Twice as Many Stars by Sanvi Tiwari. Dragon Tree by Sanvi Sakamuri. Pink Sword Lake, Lake Hillier by Aditi Kundeti. Making a Wish by Arya Srivastava. Rambutan, a Rare Fruit by Arya T. Karur. And the winners in the age for 9 to 12 category, we have a honorary mention, Red Panda by Purvi Sakamuri. It was a very close competition. Judge actually had a very tough time. So this way, thanks for this wonderful submission by Purvi. We have a third prize, Rare Horseshoe Crab by Murphy 2. Second prize goes to Why Do Humans Help Other Human Rarely? And first prize goes to Pink Salt Lake, Lake Hillier, Aditi Kundeti. Congratulations to all the winners. Age category 13 to 15. Rafflesia Bonoana Flower by Amulya Karur. Broken Heart by Tanvi Muppala. Wildlife by Sayali Ashley Queen. Rainbow Eucalyptus by Aditi Sakamuri. The winner, third prize, goes to Wildlife by Sayali Ashley Queen. Second prize goes to Rafflesia Banana Flower by Amulya Karur. And the winner, first prize, goes to Broken Heart, Tanvi Muppala, which is talking about Kawasaki disease, which is a very rare disease found mostly in infants and young children. Age category 60 and above. Celebrations by Rob Wissink. The Beauty and the Frailty by Haley Jane Kaufman. Pain and Struggle by Rob. Shriyansh Srivastava. Journey to the Center by Rob Wissink. Unique Life by Sirin Tarkeri. The Rare Beauty of Life on Earth by Gayatri Reshmi. Living Rare with Confidence by Deborah Wick. Polar Express by Jamie Barlow. My Life by Sirin Tarkeri. Seacoast Unique World by Sirin Tarkeri. Morning Rooster by Jamie Barlow. ALD Won't Stop Me by Jamie Barlow. Istanbul by Seacoast Tarkeri. And the winner, third prize for 16 and above, goes to Living Rare with Confidence, Deborah Wick. Second prize goes to The Beauty and the Frailty by Haley Jean Kaufman. And the winner, first prize, goes to Celebrations to Rob Wissink. Congratulations to all the winners. So that concludes all the winner announcement. So I would like to thank once again all the participants for enthusiastically participating and creating awareness for rare diseases and its field and as such. So we would like to let you know that the winners can expect further details over email in next 1 to 2 days, and the award distribution might take up to 4 to 5 weeks. You can reach out to us for any questions with our handle Out4Rare 2023 at googlegroups.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much for announcing those contest winners, Srinivas. Very excited to see numerous very creative art submissions this time. Thank you for everyone who participated. So with this, I hand it back to Nisha and Nara to close the proceedings with vote of thanks and next.
I'd like to take over and thank everyone on behalf of the entire IndoUSrare team. I'd like to express my deepest gratitude for each and every one of you for participating, and especially for a legend like Dr. Meyers to have been on this dais and sharing her experiences with Harsha was so inspirational to all of us. It was all of us, and her work has impacted so many lives, and it's going to continue to impact so many lives. Her experience, knowledge, and insights have been very valuable for all of us in the rare disease community, and we will continue to take that inspiration and champion for this cause. Thanks again so much for your commitment, Dr. Meyers. And thanks for everyone of you to participate. Please do check out all our programs that Harsha highlighted earlier, including the Patient Alliance program, including the Corporate Alliance, and our Patient Concierge for those who are seeking help as a patient to seek resources. Please do reach out to us. And thanks so much for this wonderful event. And thanks to all our organizing team, Nisha, Ramya, and the Ibentos team. Thank you so much. As the last comment, I would like to basically wish everybody a very happy Rare Disease Day 2023. See everyone at the next event. Thank you.